Hi Simon, how are you?
Hi, Rohini. Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. I would say I would say I'm slightly hungover, but actually that's not true. I feel quite fresh. Had quite late night last night. Got that wrong again. But
Well,
yeah,
you know
feeling good.
what? It's afternoon, so hopefully you've had a little bit of time to just get over whatever it was you were doing, celebrating.
Exactly. Lots of
Um,
water. All
Not a
good.
glass of water, always good. So I mean, first of all, thank you for joining me in this conversation about living with lockdown. I thought it was just a fun way of looking at something that's quite grim and obviously very serious. And I wanted to explore with you, some of the lighter-hearted side of what lockdown has meant for you, but also maybe come up with a few lessons and insights that you've gained. But before we get into all that meaty stuff, it'd be great if you could just tell our viewers a little bit about you and what excites you.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for inviting me to have this chat. I think it's really nice just to have a chat full stop, but you've added like a little incentive to it, which is really nice. So, intro to me, I'm Simon Jacobs, also known as Lord Simon Jacobs on LinkedIn.
All
um,
right.
so I'll go into that in a bit more when we go into the chat. I'll we'll leave that mystery there for the time being. But I'm 27 years old. I'm a Mancunian, born and raised. Entrepreneur at heart. So I started my first business, I suppose, when I was 16. It was an online magazine. Then went to university, started my first proper business, which again was a magazine. That snowballed into a bigger business in itself. We became the number one student accommodation agency in Nottingham through various different marketing tactics, which was kind of the stuff that I really enjoyed, the bread and butter, the creativity side of things. Somewhere along the lines, I graduated, and then eventually I ended up stepping back from the business. Some things worked, some things didn't. It was a roller coaster journey. But loads of things that I learned while I was young and didn't have any responsibilities, which was great. Then I started doing marketing consultancy, did that a bit differently as well. Then I got headhunted by Camelot, the lottery company. I became their brand manager in quite a quick turnaround. So I was running TV campaigns, marketing campaigns, but didn't enjoy the corporate world that much. All the stuff that I like doing, the creativity, thinking outside the box, they weren't particularly keen on. They wanted someone to be quite straight laced,
Mm.
which is fair enough. But I left Camelot, sold my shares in my business from university. That kept me sort of afloat while I was living in London, and then through a various set of adventures and exploration, I realised, or it was pointed out to me rather, that I'm a bit weird. Um, by which I mean, all the things that I've done, all the things that I've done to date, kind of have been the reasons that I've been successful up until now, in inverted commas. However you explain success. But basically, someone said to me, if you can bottle that weirdness in some way, there's value to it. And so I set up my latest venture, which is called Professional Weirdos, which is essentially a consultancy and training company that helps and gives permission to people to think outside the box, do things differently. That's both in terms of individual, but also in terms of a corporate setting.
Yeah.
Um, and alongside that, to keep myself afloat while I grow the business, I'm also lecturing in digital marketing in Burnley, and I'm part of this marketing company. And we're hoping to scale this up so that everyone can learn digital marketing skills from the experts. Basically, they're marketing experts, and if we can put the knowledge out there for them, then that's great. That's me in a nutshell.
Gosh,
Um,
and you're only 27. It's incredible.
a lot's gone
That's
on.
amazing, amazing. So we'll come back to some of those things you talked about because I'm really interested in the whole weirdo concept, which obviously
Great.
is tongue in cheek, obviously, but we should definitely talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
So, coming to where we are now with the whole lockdown thing, how are you personally dealing with it? Are you living where are you living in Manchester at the moment? Or
Yeah. So um, I left Camelot. It must be about a year and a half ago now or so, and about 6 months after that, I moved back to Manchester, saved some costs. And by moving back to Manchester, I mean moved back into the family home with my parents and my younger brother. Some people would probably see that as a step backwards, and in a way, step backwards. I don't really look into that sort of thing. But for me, one, I love my family, so it doesn't really bother me. Two, it was the right decision, and yeah. So I'm currently living in lockdown with my family, which I'm grateful for. I wouldn't have liked to have been by myself. That's for certain.
yes.
Um, and it's just a nice time. It's a nice place to be, Manchester. We're around the corner from some parks. So yeah, in terms of living with it, I'm perfectly okay, which might annoy some people. I hope not, but as in, it hasn't affected me much. It hasn't really changed all that much. It's
Yeah.
quite a nice place to be.
So was your work, did your work involve quite a lot of, remote working anyway? Did you use online quite a lot before this
So
lockdown?
with professional weirdos, primarily most of my action is online, so through the Facebook group. I have done talks in corporate companies, so I've done talks at John Lewis, Waitrose, and I've gone to the head offices. Obviously, there's not much of that at the moment. But in terms of lecturing, I'll have gone to Burnley at least 3 times a week, so Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But the owner of the company was quite quick to react to the situation, and we started moving online about 2 weeks beforehand anyway. And we were also in the throes of trying to scale it up and make it more digital anyway. So it's kind of the kick that we needed to do that.
Yes. In terms of, you mentioned obviously you like your family, which is always helpful, isn't it?
Yes.
So as a family, what's changed for you?
That's a good question. So my dad is a taxi driver, so he's not leaving the house.
Hard,
But
isn't it?
no one needs taxis at the moment. So yeah, so he's watching Sky News on repeat and some Netflix shows. So I think he's getting a bit bored, which is fair enough. But I go on a walk every day with my dog anyway, and we kind of take turns alternately with I either go with my dad, my brother, or my mum. So we get them out of the house. My mum is still working. She works in a lab testing soap, so she's kind of like what do you call it?
Key worker.
Essential work, key worker. That's the one.
Yeah.
So she's not losing the will to live just yet, because she gets to see her colleagues, and she loves her work anyway. We're on a break now because it's Passover, so she's taking work off. So all 4 of us are here, but it's not changed that much, other than we've got one person who's in the house all day, which is my dad, and I suppose in the evening we're less tired because we've not done all that much, so we spend some more time together, which is quite nice, playing board games and various other things.
Okay, and you mentioned your dad watches Sky News on repeat, which must be a little bit depressing. I mean, how, as a family, are you, or maybe talk about it personally for you, how are you lightening things up so that you don't get too bogged down with all the negativity?
Well, I was going to come on to this a bit later, but one thing that I always struggle with is routine. I'm not particularly good at routine, but somehow I wake up between either 9 and 11 every day, and whenever I go downstairs and I walk into the lounge where my dad is watching TV, he's always on the same presenter somehow every day. That's become like a rolling joke now, which is quite funny.
Like Groundhog Day.
Exactly. It's quite humorous. I don't think none of us are particularly serious anyway. We don't tend to worry. I mean, my mum's a bit of a stress head, but the cohesiveness of the family means that we all laugh and joke with each other. So in reality, we're all keeping our spirits up. I think there's boredom at times, but we make sure that we get outside. Fortunately, the weather's nice, so it means that we do get outside. And there's loads of jokes. There's always fun. My mum's been doing a lot of cooking recently because of Passover, and she doesn't like cooking, and she's not the best at it. So there's always humor about that as well. So yeah, it's all good-natured fun in terms of keeping the spirits up. So yeah, we're all reasonably happy, I would say.
Good. Okay. And have you? I can appreciate that not a huge amount has changed for you personally, but it's a very interesting time globally, isn't it? And we've all been kind of basically told to stop and reflect and reconsider how we live. Have you had any such deep thoughts or reflections about the way you live and the way you might change the way you are in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one thing that's definitely been confirmed is that I quite like being able to talk to people. I've been able to do it for years, but I quite like that people are coming around to talking online and being more open to it. and embracing it. People from across the world. So I've got friends in Australia, I've got friends, you name it, I've got friends in loads of different places, and people being more willing to take that time because they have it to
Yes.
jump on a Zoom call, Skype call, etc., and have an actual conversation. I was talking to someone, one of my LinkedIn contacts, a few days ago. He's in Hong Kong at the moment. We'd never actually spoken face to face before. We'd spoken over LinkedIn, so that's a really nice thing. The other thing, another big reflection for me is that I like a simple life. If you were to ask my friends or my family, even, they would probably say that I like things. I like nice watches, I like cars. I have aspirations to have a big house. But the reality is, when you're not comparing yourself to others because you can't go out, no one's actually buying anything. None of that really matters. I'm not using my car anymore. I've not been in my car for 3 weeks. I don't need a watch. I'm not going outside, watching the time, sort of a thing. So reflecting on what actually matters to me, which is family and the people that I surround myself with, and having the conversations and creativity, that's a massive thing for me.
That's such a beautiful piece of insight. So in a way, even though people can't travel anymore, somehow people have been brought closer. People have maybe have more time and more willingness to engage on sort of Zoom calls or Skype or whatever. That's really
Absolutely.
interesting. And has that in any way, deepened your connections with, the people outside of your close family?
Yeah. So, I've had I think 5 in total so far. Five conversations with 5 strangers, by which I mean they've been LinkedIn contacts because someone's added me or I've added them very, very absent-mindedly, and just reached out to them and say, look, let's actually get to know each other. And we'd had this conversation, and I would honestly, on the back of at least 2 of them, consider themselves my friends. We had a proper conversation, a proper contact. We were genuinely interested in what each of us have experienced and have done. So there's that, and then there's the other side of friends that I've lost touch with. There's a friend that I've not spoken to in probably 2 years.
Yeah.
And just remembering why we were friends. We just had a really good catch up. So that was lovely. So yeah, absolutely. Having that time to just talk to people is great.
I think what I loved about that, especially with LinkedIn, I mean, I find this happens a lot. People connect with me, and then immediately the next message I know is a standard message, which is almost trying to sell me something,
Yeah.
which I find quite off-putting. But on the other hand, if you have somebody who just wants a non-transactional conversation, really genuinely interested, then it just takes the whole thing to a different level, doesn't it? And I think more of us should do that rather than immediately jump to selling something. So tell me a little bit about, the whole professional weirdo thing, and I think that the weirdo description obviously is tongue in cheek, and I guess we're all weirdos on some level because we're all unique, aren't we? So tell me a little bit about where that idea came from and how you're actually turning it into something much more meaningful.
Sure. So it was off the back of coming up, leaving Camelot. I played around with, going back into marketing consultancy, doing stuff, ad hoc. And it was during a catch-up lunch with a friend. Not a particularly good friend, just someone who I'd met a few times, and we've kind of vibed. And she runs a successful blogging school and various other things online. And I was telling her about my exploits and things that I've been up to, and she just sort of sat back and said, "Simon, you're a bit weird." And I sort of sat there a bit stunned, I suppose, a bit confused. What do you mean by that? And I let her proceed. And she said, looking at all the things that you've done and all the successes that you've had to date, the reason that you've been successful is because you've done things differently. And that's in the sense of thought about things differently. You've gone after adventures that normal people wouldn't. When you're at university, you started a business. And to me, these were like second nature almost. It wasn't a thought of, oh, this will be weird. It felt like this is a decision and this is the action that has to be taken. But, on reflection, they were a bit weird to the outside world. My mum and my dad are quite 9-to-5 individuals. They've had jobs. Simply being an entrepreneur in the classical sense is outside of their frame of reference. And then you talk to various other people and it's the same. So when she said this to me, and she said, there's value in it, I thought, okay, well, what can I do to what can I do to provide that value? And so I started reflecting on myself, and I started to figure out why it was that I became the weirdo that I became. How did I become this person? And how can I help others become, or have an experience of that, unleashing of the weird, the inner weirdo. I set up a Facebook group called "Is the World Strange or Am I?" simply to find other people that were like me, and by which I mean people who did things differently. And that grew quite quickly. And then along the way, I came up with the name of Professional Weirdos. So I wanted something that described me and described others that were like this. So basically, there are kind of three meanings to it. So there's people who do things weird, but do it as their profession. So a big moment for me was when I went on the London Loo Tour, which is a tour of all the public toilets around London. So I must have heard about it through like a magazine article or something, and it sounded ridiculous, and I had some spare time, so I signed up to do it. I think it was about £20, and I met the lady who ran it. I think her name was Rachel, and we literally scoured London, and she pointed out all the public toilets. Some were just public toilets, some had deeper meanings, some were historical artifacts and things. And when I started reflecting about Professional Weirdos, she was someone that resonated as a professional weirdo. So she does this weird thing professionally. Yeah. So she does this thing that she's passionate about, and she makes money doing it. So that's a professional weirdo. And then there's sort of myself, who was in Camelot. I would class myself as a weirdo in a professional setting. So in a professional job, I was doing it weird. I was thinking outside the box. And then for myself, I am now a professional weirdo, sort of kind of cubed or squared. I'm a professional times a professional weirdo, because that's what I do as a job. So that's how it came about. And the idea was that I would create a methodology, understand how mine and other people's weirdnesses became, and how they are confident enough to put that out there as well, which is a key part. And basically run a training workshop once a month for corporate companies, which has like 12 steps. By the end of it, people will be outside their comfort zones a bit more, be more okay being confident, putting stuff out there, and be okay with failure. And basically just reigniting their creative spark as well. And that's both as an individual, but also as a team. So the team has to be able to embrace it as well. So that's for corporate and for individuals. And along the way, I've written a book as well. And 2 books, in fact. What are
the books called?
So one is One is called Get Started. Okay. So something else that people point out about me is that I talk about something and then I do it. I'm not an overthinker. When I meet perfectionists, when I meet people who like to do a really good job and stuff, I admire them massively, because I point blank do not care at the point of starting what something's going to look like, whether the spelling's right. And to some people that's horrifying, but to others, people look at it as an immense skill to be able to just get started on something. So I thought, okay, well, I've got a bunch of ideas and things that I think about when I'm about to start something, put it down on paper, release it so that people can get an inside thought on how to get stuff started. So it's tips like break stuff down to the smallest step possible. So if I'm thinking of a business, I'm thinking, what's the smallest version of it that I can start, whether that's putting a website up, pulling a Facebook group together. Be accountable to someone, to find someone who's either doing something similar or something completely outside of it, and tell them what you're going to do with set deadlines. So it's just a small book with about 50 tips of how to get started on something. Then on kind of the flip side, the other book is...
Sorry, where's your book available? Is it available on Amazon?
Yeah. So the book's available on Amazon. So it's called Get Started. And if you search Lord Simon Jacobs, it'll come up as well. But you can also find it on my own website, professionalweirdos.co.uk. If you order it through there, I can sign it as well. So I get the books and I can sign it and send it off.
Brilliant.
You can buy it from either of those. And then the other book, which is yet to be published, I need to follow my own advice and get it started, but it's written in pretty much its full version. It's called 367 Ways to Unleash Your Inner Weirdo. So it's, as it says on...
ways. That's amazing.
Yeah, so I thought I'd do one for every day and add a few extra, because it'll be weird. And it's there's some basically it's things to get you out of your comfort zone. So there are small things such as wear odd socks for a day. Some people, already do that, but for some people that's going to be a huge like mind shift change to actively pull 2 pairs of socks apart and wear them randomly. That's going to be massive, but it's a reminder throughout the day that you're doing something differently and getting outside your comfort zone, and to some much bigger things as well. So you can pick and choose. It's not chronological. Just a way to change your mindset really and get you out of your comfort zone.
Sounds brilliant. Listen, I can't wait. I will definitely get your book that's already published, and I can't wait for the other one. So tell me about the Lord Simon Jacob. Where did that come from? Or is that
Sure.
just one of your weird things then?
That's that it is. It's one of the earlier weird things actually. So I was about 16. I was 16, 17, and I'd recently read a book called Yes Man by Danny Wallace. There's a film about it with Jim Carrey in it. You might have seen it.
Is that based on the book? Is it?
It is. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I've
So
seen the film. It's funny. Yeah.
right. So the book, in my opinion, is 1,000 times better. Don't get me wrong, I like the film, I love Jim Carrey, but I'd read the book before, and whenever you read the book before, the film tends to be not as good anyway.
Yes.
The film is the blockbuster version of it. The book is a reasonably normal chap from London. It's based in England, and this guy is down on his luck. He's feeling sorry for himself. His girlfriend's recently broken up with him, and he's sat on a bus going somewhere. And he sits down next to a chap with a glorious beard, and he tells this guy all his woes and everything. And the guy on the bus says, "You need to say yes more." And Danny, being the journalist and the obsessive person that he is, decides to invest all of his time into saying yes to everything, basically. And it's just a story of all these yeses that he ends up doing, and it takes him on weird and wonderful adventures. It really spoke to me. It's not, as far as I'm aware, it's not written as a self-help book. It's written as something funny, a nice little story. But around that time, I was quite a shy person. I think I was coming out my shell around that time anyway, so it was the perfect timing. Yeah. I did a week of Yes, and it wasn't this massive, grandiose. I didn't go on adventures to Vegas or whatever, but there was a shift. I did say yes to things, and I recognized when I said no to things, purely out of awkwardness more than anything else, or fear. So when I plunged myself into the yes, I ended up going to different people's houses, doing different things, and it really did have a mind shift change. But around that time, people were applying to university, looking for courses, and I thought, all right, well, let's see if we can find a loophole. I've always liked loopholes anyway. And I was looking online to see whether, you could buy a degree online, whether I could become a doctor, whatever, find a way around it. Such as the internet, you can buy degrees online. You can buy doctorates online. They are thousands and thousands of pounds. I think you effectively donate money to the university and they'll give you this honorary doctorate. But on that journey, I found that you could also buy a lordship. So there's an old feudal law, I think, in Britain, where if you had a plot of land that was on a manor, if you owned a manor, you were lord of the manor effectively, and that law's not really disappeared. So if you own a bit of that old land, you effectively become lord of the manor. So I paid for like a square foot of land in a manor, became lord of the manor. So I discovered this, bought it, ran downstairs to my parents and told them that I've just bought a lordship. Their instant and usual response is, "Don't be stupid, Simon." 2 weeks later, the certificate that said I'm a lord arrived, and it said that you could get it on your bank accounts and stuff like that. So I got my mum to take me to the bank, much to her embarrassment. Went into the bank and said to the clerk, "Can I have my bank account changed to Lord Simon Jacobs?" She looked a bit confused, but she took it to the back. Apparently, they all had a nice chat in the staff room. The manager came out and spoke to me and said, "Yeah, we can probably change it. We'll change Simon to Lord." Like they didn't have Lord in terms of Mr., Mrs., Lord. They would have just had to change Simon, so they put Lord J.J. Jacobs. My mum was still like red-faced, embarrassed by her son. And then 2 weeks later, my brand new bank card came with Lord Simon Jacobs on it. And many adventures and excitement ensued on the back of that, and I would say it's one of the best investments that I've ever made.
Really? Oh my God, that's such a great story. Yeah. So was that part of your, say yes experiment, or was it
It,
separate from that?
I'm not sure. The timelines are a bit blurred.
Okay.
It was either during that week or it was the follow up to it. I was still in the throes of it, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I first off, I completely resonate. I love, the way you articulated all of that, and I think that we need more people to embrace their weirdness or uniqueness or whatever you want to call it,
yeah,
and actually give themselves permission to first of all explore it, but also then to show it to the world without fearing
yeah,
rejection and stuff like that. So more power to you. So
yeah.
in this current environment, which is very febrile and extremely fraught with unknown stuff, I mean, I can imagine that people who are structured and like to know what they're doing, it must be a nightmare for them. um, for you, if you look at it very sort of objectively, how do you think people should deal with that kind of situation? Is this a time for them to really connect with their inner weirdness or uniqueness? And how would you, as a professional weirdo, how would you go about helping them?
Yeah, it's really tough. It's really tough. I've spoken to some people. There are people across the, let's call it, the spectrum in terms of open-mindedness and sort of closed-mindedness, and positivity and negativity. When you have someone such as myself, I suppose, who's quite a positive person most of the time, people on the negative, closed-minded side of the spectrum, I suppose, would think that I'm naive in the way that I approach things. And to them I'd say, if that's how you look at me, then fair enough. But if I can open the door ever so slightly so you can think even a modicum of positivity, or take yourself a second to reflect and think, whether you're still employed and working, whether that's from home or whether you still have to go into the office or whatever. There's still a difference in the world that you can sort of reflect on and see how you can adapt in some way. So whether that's thinking about the future, this isn't necessarily the last of this sort of thing that's going to happen in the world during your lifetime. You can look at that as a negative thing, that this thing is going to happen again and again, or you can look at it in opportunities. How can you change your life to, mirror that in a way? How can you prepare for it? In the same way, if you're working from home or if you've been put on furlough, look at it as an opportunity as best possible. There's absolutely nothing wrong with sitting and being worried. It would be a shame to be, but at the same time, don't force yourself out of that mode. But try for 10-15 minutes to sit and think about something positive. A positive mindset is so powerful. Think about all the positive that's going on in the world because of it. Look at the claps that we do for the NHS around the world, all these people coming together. I mean, I know there's a lot of conspiracies and things about like the pollution and people driving in their cars, but the reality must be that people are going out less and causing less pollution in the world. So there's loads of positives to look on the back of that. And then on a personal point of view, there's so much extra time if you're not going to work and taking that travel time. What can you do with that extra 20 minutes either side, for going to the office? If you think about it, even if it's even if it's only 15 minutes that it takes you to get to the office and back, that's an extra half hour that you have in your day. That's amazing. When else do you get that half hour? That for me, that's the simplest positive outlook in terms of what's currently going on. So make something of those 15 minutes, whether that's even just taking a nap. How often do you get to have a nap during the middle of the day? Or, find something that you're interested in. The internet is a ridiculous place with so many different things. You probably can't even imagine half of it. So go exploring. And that kind of links back to my book, Get Started. We have all these opportunities that are thrown at us and you end up in like analysis paralysis.
Yes.
Because there's so much to go out there. But the tip would be to just find one thing, whatever it is, even the first thing you land upon, go explore it. You don't know where that next thing is going to take you. You might not like it. Go and look for the other thing, So yeah, just go and explore.
So
That's
say yes to more things,
yeah,
essentially.
absolutely,
What you're
yeah,
saying. Yeah, yeah.
100%.
And in terms of your own personal insights, because I mean, obviously you're someone from this conversation I'm getting says you're quite aware of who you are and the things that make you tick. But even for someone like you, has this enforced isolation and change in the world around you, has it brought any fresh insights for you about who you are?
Um, it's a good question. Fresh insights. I wouldn't say anything particularly fresh, which is a shame. I'd love to have a fresh insight. Absolutely. I think okay. So there's two things. One is that it's reinforced the fact of how important family is and the closeness of people around you. 100%. I mean, last night, for example, it's Seder at the moment, so we were having a meal, which is the Seder, and my grandpa is in Sheffield, and so he's been isolating by himself,
Mm.
which he's quite a strong individual, and I think he likes his own company, but obviously it's forced upon you, so it's less okay. And usually at our Seder we have our extended family, my grandpa and various other people at the table. And so this year we had to do a Zoom call with him. So we had him on the TV in big with him, and whilst it was lovely and it was novel and it was different, I always tried to find the positives from it, and it's something that we're going to remember. It was a shame not to be able to hear the closeness of his laughter, be able to touch him, give him a hug. There's always a bit of not food fight, but we'll chuck the whatever it is over to him, and there was that closeness that was missing. So it's reinforced that, and wanting family to be together. In terms of other things to reflect on, it's more of a case of like slightly tweaking professional weirdos and how it works. So I want to be able to do something that scales digitally. So whereas I would have quite close and small workshops with 10 people, there's a possibility to do more of a professional weirdo networking thing where we all share different creativity ideas and stuff like that. So it's been giving me time to reflect on that. And also just how much I love nature. I absolutely love nature, and just making sure that I go out for a walk every day. When I was working, I take my dog over to doggy daycare, and they do the walks for him. So when I got home, there was no onus on me to take him for a walk, but now I have to take him for a walk. And the word "have" isn't the right word. I get to.
You get to.
So, and it's just really nice. We're around the corner from a lovely big trail, I suppose. There's water flowing. It's just lovely. I will never get bored of that view and the trees and everything. Yeah, it's great.
There's a lovely expression I came across called vuja de, which is the opposite of deja vu, and it's a kind of
Oh,
made up word, and essentially it means that you look at old familiar things as if for the very first time.
that's lovely.
Yeah, isn't it? I just love it. It's from this fantastic book called A More Beautiful Question, which I think you will
Oh,
really enjoy because it's right up your street. It's
yeah.
just asking more questions, getting curious and creative.
Mm,
It's by a chap called Warren Berger. And I think that's what this whole enforced stillness and isolation is causing us to do, isn't it? To look at old familiar things as if for the first time. And I think the most oldest and most familiar thing to all of us is ourselves, because
yeah.
we've kind of begun to believe that we know ourselves really well. We don't need to really stop and reflect, and I think maybe that could be changing a little bit. So I want to sort of maybe just get a feel for what you think is going to happen in the future. Now, I know it's really hard to predict and it's such a big unknown, but just from your perspective and maybe putting your professional weirdo hat on, um, sitting here objectively, I'm thinking that all of us need to really embrace, what it is about us that we can adapt to this new world. How can we make a difference? Perhaps not in the same way as we did before. What's your take? How would you see the future, both generally for the world at large, but also for yourself?
That's a great question. Massive question, but great question. So it's something that I think about very regularly. Like, what is the future going to look like? not necessarily for me, but just like the world, it's quite an exciting concept of where it's going to be. I've read various books on whether it be politics, technology, you name it. I've sort of I've like delved and read things into it. What's the future going to look like? And a lot of the stuff that I've read actually play quite nicely into a future that's had this COVID-19 situation, in the sense that, there's a lot of talk about universal basic income, and therefore the politics, fall in line with that. So, for example, the way that the world works, there's less need for people to do mundane jobs. So things like factory working, well, you name it, anything that can be replaced by robotics or AI does get replaced, and therefore humans' purpose on the world is fundamentally changed. Even things such as doctors, lawyers, accountants, up until the point where you become a specialist, all of that gets knocked out as well, because those are repeatable tasks. And so people need to reflect on, what would you do if your job was no longer necessary? By which I mean your income was automatically given to you. How would you spend your time? And with that comes, what would you love to do? What would you love to be doing? Is that some kind of charity work? Is that gardening? So this is an opportunity to find out what spurs you on. A lot of people will have fallen into jobs through, you fall into things because that's the nature of how life works.
Yeah.
But it's a chance now to think about, what would you do differently? People often reflect on things. I wish I'd done this. I wish I'd done that. This is a great opportunity to do those things and to think about that in the future. So for me, I've long said that I'd love to do a law degree, less so because I want to be a lawyer, but more because I love loopholes and I love like old laws and things like that. So whether or not I get the degree, the opportunity to read those books and read those things and get an insight into it. And I've got a brochure actually about a law degree, which is really exciting to me. So it's an opportunity to have a think about, if the world went into the extremes, if these universal basic income things became the reality, if these jobs did get replaced, what would you be filling your life with? And if you're filling your life with those nice things, how are you going to keep those things in place when the world returns to normal after this situation? And I suppose, in terms of the more immediate future, in the coming months, how the world is going to be different. I'd like to think that people do start working from home a bit more. There isn't a need to go into the office as much. There's the upside to that is, obviously the environment, pollution hopefully will be down. People have more time to spend with their families, their friends. You don't have to travel outside of the city into the city. And you get to spend both your time, your money, and whatever else on the things that you really enjoy. So that would be, it's people will probably get angry with this, but it's kind of the kick that the world needed, in my opinion, in terms to move us on from like the same that we were hundreds and hundreds of years ago into what is the future, that is the now, basically. In the digital marketing business I work in, we use the phrase, digital isn't the future anymore, it's the now. And that's the reality. So I think that's kind of the future. Think about how you're going to operate in the future. So yeah, that in terms of what the future is going to look like, in my opinion, it's going to be people enjoying themselves more, and being more conscious about the environment, being more conscious about what they do, and being more conscious with the time that they spend and who they spend it with.
So just everyone just living more simply and
I think so.
mindfully maybe as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be an upheaval, of course, because people who their whole lives will change in a very, very meaningful way. So if you were to maybe give one or two tips on how people can actually think about this in a more positive way and become more adaptable, because at the end of the day, I think that's what is called for, right? We need to all learn to recognize the changes and actually see how best we can fit in with it. What would your advice be?
So the first thing I would say, it's not my tip. It's something that I heard and I enjoy whenever I hear it. It's a cliche in the corporate world, And it's instead of saying no, say what if, and how about, you know, instead of shooting down ideas, how can you add to it? How can you adapt it? How can you change it? So if someone's offering you advice, you know, don't say, yes, I've thought of that, or no, that's a bad idea. Try and adapt and add on to it. And it might sound cliche and, you know, something, it might sound like rubbish to someone who really doesn't like that sort of thing. And it's going to be really alien when you start doing it, but it does shift your mindset. It's the whole act confident, feel confident, you know, feel like the job that you want to be, sort of a thing.
Yes,
you know,
yes,
pretend and become. You know, the reality is that it does shift the mindset, definitely. You know, when you walk out on stage, the experts say to stand straight and feel confident, and the confidence will come. And it's the same, you know, the more you repeat it, the more your mind will shift in that way. And it's the same with, you know, people say that smiling even when you're not happy makes you feel happy because your muscle memory triggers the chemical receptors in your brain to feel happy. So that's one thing. So be conscious of how you react to other people and how you think about things. Try as best as possible to react positively to things, and gradually you'll start to feel more positive about things. The other thing that I will say is explore, and that's a really simple thing to do. So whether that's in your house, so for example, my parents have lived in this house as long as I can remember. I think I was 2 when they moved in. So it's the only house I know. And it's not changed all that much. You know, we've decorated some rooms, we'll have a kitchen done, whatever. But the reality is that it stayed very similar. And really, like, I've never really looked up. You know, you always look ahead. And I've also never looked down, really, you know, and I've spotted things that I didn't even know were in there, you know.
Puja day. This is puja day.
Exactly. It really is. It really is.
Yeah.
So, I mean, from like a light switch, like I actually looked at a light switch rather than, you know, muscle memory reaching for it. I actually looked at it, and there was a crack in it, and there was like above the wallpaper, there was something that I'd never seen before. And it was like, wow, as if I have never seen that. And, you know, on the walks that I take round the corner from me, I mean, this is going back a few years now. So I had my dog, and because of my dog, I started doing more walks. And I went on a few more walks, and I found like different alleyways along the way. And it just brought me to these places that I never knew existed. There's this huge field, basically 5 minutes around the corner from my house, that I didn't know existed. And, you know, even now when I walk on the same trail, I've looked up and there's like a birdhouse and a tree 7 foot high sort of thing. And it's just, go out and explore, or even stay in and explore. Go look around your house and really have a look, and like open your eyes to these things. And, you know, it's an eye opener, quite literally. And it's a mind shift changer. You know, what are the other things that you've missed? You know, what are the things that you can reflect on? And yeah, I wrote down. You might have seen me looking down. I wrote down Puja Day, and I'm gonna have a look at that book. That's a really good thing for me. So I really appreciate that.
You will absolutely love it. I'm sure of it.
Yeah.
It's one of those books that I've read. Actually, I haven't read it. I've listened to it. I've got the Audible version, and it's one of my favorite books. Listen, it's been such a fascinating conversation, and I just love the way you think about life. And I think the 2 tips you gave at the end is, one is to kind of use the what if mentality to say things, even if something seems to be disagreeable. You know, you don't have to agree with it, but you can explore, which led you on to the second thing, is just, you know, open your mind and your eyes and, you know, heart to some extent as well, to things around you that maybe you've not really even looked at. I love those 2 bits of advice, and I think we could all do so much better with that. So is there anything else you want to leave us with? I mean, if people want to get in touch with you, what's your website called?
Yeah, there's not much else that I want to leave. You know, I think I've put it all out into the open. It's been a really fun conversation. You know, I've really enjoyed the questions.
Thank you. I've loved it too. Thank you.
I'm
so
pleased.
Your website is...
Yeah, the website is professionalweirdos.co.uk. So that gives you an overview of what it's about. It gives you, you know, there are a few different sections. There's sections for individuals. There's sections for corporates. So if you're a manager or an owner of a big corporate company, let me know. You can also find my book on Amazon or on the website. And if you want to get in contact, you can send me an email. I'm always happy to receive emails. It's simon@professionalweirdos.co.uk. Or you can add me on Facebook, join the Facebook group called Professional Weirdos, or you can find me on LinkedIn under Lord Simon Jacobs.
Lord Simon Jacobs. I will find you straight away on there.
Lovely.
Listen, thank you so much, Simon. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I wish you all the best for your upcoming book. And I'm sure we'll all be really helped by reading how we can change the way we think and act. So good luck with that.
Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing the other conversations that you've had with this.
Yeah, really hopefully they'll be out, within the next week to 10 days. Thank you.
That's great. Yeah.
Take care.